Thank you for tuning into this episode of Channel Surfing. I'm going to go over in this episode how I use my chart plotter, just a high level, to show you guys how I set up each of the individual screens and whatnot and what I use the most. Haven't done a whole lot on electronics, and a lot of people have been asking for that, so this will be the first in several other videos that I plan on publishing all about the Garmin electronics.
Close your eyes, hear the voice within, call it.
So without any further ado, let's get started. So looking down on the chart plotter, the very first thing that I always have up is my dashboard, right? I have another video out. If you've not checked that out, you should. That shows how to make this dashboard. This works really well for the gas outboards. It's everything I need to see on one screen. Because I've got the Lenco AutoGlide, I get the trim tab settings, you know, with the position of my trim tabs and the pitch. Lenco AutoGlide is what gives me that information. Unit voltage, engine voltage lets me know that the house battery and the engine batteries are being charged correctly. Right now I'm actually sitting up here in Dagmars. We're in dry dock, so the engines and stuff aren't running. We're actually out of the water. So high level on all the screens I use. So first thing I'll say is if you've not upgraded the software on your chart plotter, I upgrade mine all the time, regularly. I stay current. I think it's really important to do that. Garmin does have bugs every once in a while, and I deal with the bugs, but none of them have really been catastrophic. I am a firm believer in maintaining a most up-to-date software. Right, there was a major update they made, I want to say about a year ago, 21 to 22 I think it was, where they redesigned the whole screen. It's actually easier to move around on there, so I really like the new layout. So anyhow, this is what I have pinned. So the engine display, right, this is what I look at most of the time. Nav chart, maneuvering watch. So maneuvering watch, I was in the Navy for 8 years on submarines, and anytime a ship is pulling out of port or coming into port, they station the maneuvering watch. Basically, it's everybody is at their station. Nobody's in their rack sleeping, you know, because that's when the ship is most vulnerable. When you're maneuvering it in and out of port. So maneuvering watch is where I always start. What is maneuvering watch? It gives me a navigational chart without radar because I'm close to port, so radar puts too much noise and stuff on the screen. And then I have a sonar on the right hand side. The other thing you'll notice too is the data on the far right hand side. This is the same on every screen that I have. I wish there was a way that I could tell Garmin, put this on every screen, but there isn't. You have to manually program it on every screen that you use. So from top to bottom, it's always coolant temperature and oil pressure, comes from the Yamaha. I want to know coolant temperature because let's say I ran over some kelp and the engine blocked the coolant coming into the engine, right? You know, got some kelp or plastic bag wrapped around the lower unit. The engine's going to overheat. I want to know coolant temp's going to go high. I want to see that as quick as possible so I can turn the engine off before it actually overheats and does damage. Oil pressure, you always want to know that because if you don't have oil pressure and you think you ought to, like right now the engine is turned off, so I expect no oil pressure, but if the engine was running and I saw oil pressure go away, I'd want to turn the engine off. GPS speed, I do knots on the Garmin, and the Yamaha display right next to it only does miles per hour, so I have it configured. Fuel flow is the next one underneath that, and I do GPS speed over fuel flow to match the Yamaha display that does miles per hour over fuel flow. The conversion factor is 1.15. So you take your knots times 1.15 and that gives you your miles per hour. So if I have 20 knots over 20 gallons per hour, I know my miles per gallon is 1.15 miles per gallon. Right, that's the easy way to think of it. You know, fuel remaining is the next one down, and that's really important because you don't ever want to run out of gas. And then the bottom right hand is depth on every screen. Everywhere on the chart plotter, I have depth at the lower right hand corner because you never want to run aground either, right? So every screen I flip to, you'll see the exact same on the right hand side. It's the exact same top to bottom. That way it's the same on every screen, so my eyes get used to knowing where that data is at and it's in the same spot. But here and again I have to manually program it on each screen. I wish there was a way that Garmin would say, I'll let you do it. The only deviation I'll make, and I'm pointing out right here, is for fishing. Right, the screens that I use for fishing, I don't care about fuel flow when I'm fishing. You know, is it a 1 gallon per hour, 2 gallons per hour? So I do time of day, because I want to know what the exact time is that I put my crab pots down, or shrimp pots or whatnot. Right, but everything else, same. Coolant temperature, oil pressure, GPS speed, fuel remaining depth is always the same across the board. So screens I use, so maneuvering watch is what I always start out with when I'm coming or going to port. Right, until I get out to where, you know, so I'll flip back and forth between maneuvering watch and my dashboard when I'm driving out to sea or coming back in. Nav chart is where I go to set my course with where I'm going to be. And this does not have radar on it, because radar, like I said, you know, if you're too close to a lot of other boats and a port and stuff, radar will become more, it'll give you too much clutter on the screen. Once I'm away from sea, if I'm going, you know, 7 knots or less slow boating, then I'll do a single radar display and turn radar on. If I'm cruising, which means I'm up on plane, you know, going faster than 12 or 13 knots, then I'll flip to the dual radar. And the dual radar is helpful because I do a 1/3, 2/3 split on this screen. So the 1/3 split, this side, I never zoom out past a mile. So it's always 1 nautical mile or less. Usually it's a half a mile or a quarter mile. Call this my danger zone, right? And then the 2/3 wider area is never closer than a mile. It's always, usually it's between 1 and 6 nautical miles. All right, and that lets me zoom out so I can see upcoming turns and any ships that are further ahead on, you know, on AIS or radar that shows there. And then I can flip the radio, you know, for the bottom toolbar on or off, depending what we're listening to. Charts and sonar, here again, we use this primarily for like anchoring or shell fishing. And that's what I use. That's the majority, is those 4 screens. That's why they're here on the left. They're easy to get to. The dashboard, the nav chart for plotting my course. The other thing is the nav chart I usually have as north up, because it's easier to understand. Whereas everything else I use my heads up. Now that way what I see around the boat matches you know, the direction the boat's pointing. So if I'm pointing due west and there's, you know, a point in front of me, then the chart plotter will look the same as where I'm at. And that's high level how I set up my chart plotter. If you'd like to see more videos all about the Garmin chart plotter and how I use it on channel surfing, head on over to patreon.com/channel surfing or click the link in the description below.
If you enjoyed watching this video, click the screen to watch another.